I absolutely love watching my kids grow up. And this is actually a growth chart that we keep in our house. And you can't see it, but I have the ages of each of my 3 kids and how tall they were at a certain stage of life. And when I look over the crowd at my church, I see all age groups. I see children, I see young people, young adults, mature adults. But interestingly enough, I cannot equate physical maturity with spiritual maturity. In other words, I may be looking at a young person who in his spiritual maturity is an adult, and I may be looking at an adult who in his spiritual maturity is a child. When it comes to growing as a disciple, let me give you a few thoughts. First, spiritual growth is the natural byproduct of spiritual life. Growth is one of the essential signs of life. You know, when the plants in my backyard stop growing, they're dying. And where there is no growth, no life exists. And that's why I can't imagine how a person can possibly be born again and yet not have this burning passion to grow spiritually. Secondly, spiritual growth is not constant but intermittent. And what I mean by that is if you were to chart, my own journey as a follower of Christ, it would probably not look like this. Okay, where I'm just kind of constantly and consistently growing and maturing as a perfect Christian. No, my spiritual growth chart looks something like this, where I've had some times of accelerated growth interspersed with a lot of times of extreme setback and defeat. And I think if you're honest with yourself, you probably have to admit that you'd find the same is exactly true for you as well. Your journey as a disciple is filled with a lot of peaks as well as a lot of valleys. And so growth happens intermittently. But here's the thing, I'm still a lot further along right here than I was when I first started. Here's the third principle. Spiritual growth is not accidental, it's intentional. No one ever accidentally just drifts towards spiritual maturity. That's why someone can be a Christian for decades and yet still not display much growth. You only mature when you're intentional about your growth. And so if you don't make an intentional investment in your own spiritual life, you're not going to grow that much. Nelson Searcy is a pastor I greatly respect, and he said that he had a mentor one time that asked him, Nelson, what is your plan for growth and development this year? And Nelson said, well, I really don't have a plan. And his mentor said, well, I can pretty much guess how much God's going to use you there. And Nelson said that kind of stung a little bit, but it was exactly what he needed to hear. He needed to have an intentional plan for his own growth. So here's what we're going to do today. I'm going to talk about the 5 stages of discipleship, which are going from being dead to being born again, to becoming a spiritual infant, to becoming a child, to growing as a young adult, to then becoming a spiritual parent. And you're going to be able to see exactly where you are in this process. And I'm going to give you some next steps to help move you from where you are now to where God wants you to be.